Look, James, in all due respect, is a political hack.
A few days after political hack James Carville attacked Bernie Sanders on MSNBC, Bernie Sanders was asked about it on CNN and attacked Carville back. Now, before I get to that clip, I got to show you how this all started. So James Carville was on MSNBC and just straight up lied about Bernie Sanders. So this is the kind of thing where, as I'm going to show you later, was the kind of thing that would get you kicked off of cable television. Lying about candidates in the race got you kicked off back in 2008. Got James Carville kicked off to CNN back in 2008. And I'll get to that in a minute. But first, here's James Carville's video, and I'll respond after you see this crap.
The only thing between the United States and the abyss is the Democratic Party. That's it. And if we go the way of the British Labour Party, if we nominate Jeremy Corbyn, it's going to be the end of days. If the British Labour Party would have nominated David Miliband, they'd be in power. So I am scared to death. I really am. And I think people are going to, and I think I'm waiting. I hope these African American voters in the South, I grew up in Iberville Parish, Louisiana. I live in Orleans Parish, Louisiana. I know 10 times more African Americans than most people I know. And they're looking for somebody that can come in and not just excite them, but talk about things that really matter to them in everyday life. They're not interested in socialism and the revolution and all that foolishness you hear. They're interested in somebody that's going to come to them and articulate a vision as to how they fit into this country and what's their relationship and what kinds of things that the schools that kids go to, the health care their parents receive, the wages they receive. That's what matters to people. And the reason I'm for Michael Bennet is I know that given his background and his story, he's able to connect with people. He would pick up 55 Senate seats.
All right. Michael Bennet. Before I even get to any of the other comments here, James Carville backed Michael Bennet, who, in case you didn't know, was in the race. And that same day, this is in New Hampshire, that same day Carville backed Michael Bennet is when Michael Bennet dropped out of the race. Yes, Michael Bennet was able to connect with so many voters that most people didn't even know he was running. Now, let's get to some of Carville's other points here. He talks about Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party leader in the UK. Labour Party lost a huge election last year to the Conservatives. The reason for that loss, I covered it. You can go watch that video. I covered it. I looked specifically at what happened. Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party lost that race because they changed their position on Brexit. That was the main reason. They also didn't put enough energy into rural communities. So the combination of that plus their position on Brexit is why they lost the election. Because if you go back to 2017, Labour made huge gains in 2017 with the Jeremy Corbyn platform, except for one difference. Their position on Brexit was different. So in 2017, they accepted the result of Brexit. And in 2020, or in 2019, last year, they changed their position on Brexit to push for another referendum. So this was the main difference here. Brexit was the main issue in the UK, and Jeremy Corbyn, that is the only position where Jeremy Corbyn changed, and they lost because of it. So this has nothing to do with Labour wanting to invest more into education and healthcare and other areas. It has everything to do with just Brexit, which clearly is not an issue right now in the Democratic primary or the U.S. election. Now, the most amazing part of all this is when Carville here talks about how, Democrats need a candidate that's actually talking about the issues, not this socialism. And then he turns to, we need a candidate that talks about healthcare, talks about wages, talks about education. Like, what? What are you talking about? Bernie said this is why Bernie has so much support, is because he's talking about healthcare, because he's talking about wages, because he's talking about education, and has a plan for all of it, and has had these plans and these positions for the past 40 years, has fought for them the entire time while the entire political and media establishment has been against him. That is why Bernie has so much support. But they wheel these idiots out from the 90s on television like they have any opinion that actually matters or any informed opinion. And they don't. They have no idea what they're talking about. And if they do know what they're talking about, they are straight lying to your face. Which is why, here's how Bernie Sanders responded to James Carville on CNN last night.
Carville, who's obviously a longtime Clinton loyalist, was supporting Senator Michael Bennet, who obviously dropped out of the primary race last night. He said this week that core Democratic voters aren't interested in being in what he said a cult. He said they're not interested in socialism and revolution and other things he called foolishness, and that, quote, I don't know how you win an election 78 years old screaming in a microphone about the revolution. I don't know if he was actually screaming at the time, although it's very possible, knowing James. But so I want to give you a chance to respond.
Look, James, in all due respect, is a political hack who said very terrible things when he was working for Clinton against Barack Obama. I think he said some of the same things. Look, we are taking on the establishment. This is no secret to anybody. We're taking on the wall. I guess the former head of Goldman Sachs attacked me yesterday.
Yeah, he had
We're
some
taking
unkind
on
things
Wall
as well.
Street. He did, yeah, Wall Street. And the insurance companies don't like me. And you know what? The pharmaceutical industry, which is charging us 10 times more for the same drugs they sell in Canada, they don't like me either. Nor does the fossil fuel industry, because their product happens to be destroying our planet. Nor does the military-industrial complex or the prison-industrial complex. We are taking on Trump, the Republican establishment, Carville, and the Democratic establishment. But at the end of the day, the grassroots movement that we are putting together of young people, of working people, of people of color, want real change.
But you know,
and they want us to take.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's not all, just establishment folks who have a vested interest. I mean, there are, American citizens who, went out to vote in New Hampshire and voted for Klobuchar or voted for Buttigieg or in some cases Biden, who just feel like revolution is, it's just too much. They maybe like their plans. They don't want their insurance taken away for something else in government hands they don't have, any idea about.
Well, first of all, I think if you look at the issues that we are talking about, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, enormously popular. Demanding that the wealthy and the powerful and large corporations start paying their fair share of taxes, enormously powerful and popular. Making public colleges and universities tuition free. As I said earlier, Medicare for all was one of the reasons we won in New Hampshire. It is very popular in New Hampshire, and I suspect among Democrats all over this country. Criminal justice reform, immigration reform. These are issues that the American people, in fact, support. And we're going to win this election because we are prepared to stand up to Wall Street and the corporate elite and finally do what the American people want.
Now, maybe he has said similar comments before, but this is the first time that I remember that Bernie Sanders actually called out a political hack for being a political hack. He needs to show this fight more often, because this is what he has to contend with. The James Carville is like, this is just one example. This is what CNN and MSNBC have on all the time. And to be fair, CNN is a little better. They have Alexandra Rojas of Justice Democrats. She is now a contributor on CNN. They have Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur on quite often. So they have these moments where they actually are representing the progressive side. Occasionally, CNN is. MSNBC, though, is just a complete wash. I mean, the James Carvilles is what they normally have. Like, just these people wheeled out from the 90s, presenting misinformation, purposely in most cases, to confuse the American voter into thinking who's for them and who isn't for them. I mean, James, as I showed you earlier, you can take apart James Carville's comments in 2 seconds. The idea that Bernie's not fighting for issues, like, what are you how is anybody even supposed to believe what you're saying? I mean, you saw, I did a story earlier this week. It feels like earlier this year, where a lady was on MSNBC. She was asked by Ari Melber who she voted for. And she told him that she voted for Bernie Sanders essentially because MSNBC keeps attacking Bernie Sanders. So, like, these attacks, I don't think largely are working. They are definitely working in some sense because they create this idea that we can't have Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is unelectable. Even though you look at who Bernie brings out. He brings out young people, brings out independents, brings out working class voters. I mean, I know I repeat myself saying this every single time, but I'm hoping new people start watching these videos and begin to understand why Bernie Sanders is the most electable candidate, because he brings out the very people that did not vote in 2016. He will bring them out in 2020. Young people especially, independents especially, working class voters especially. He's able to reach people that have felt disillusioned by this two-party system. And as a lifelong independent, Bernie Sanders speaks to them, and you can see his 40-year fight where he's actually has been fighting for them this entire time. Now, just on James Carville for a second, as I mentioned this earlier, I mean, apart from being wrong on every single issue from gay rights to healthcare, the funny thing is, back in 2008, Carville was actually temporarily banned from CNN for his continued disingenuous attacks on Barack Obama. Now, imagine they held the same standard today. Imagine CNN or MSNBC banned James Carville for lying about what Bernie Sanders represents, or purposely not informing people about how he is talking about healthcare, Medicare for all. Like, are you kidding me? But not even just Carville, like hosts on the network, Chris Matthews, fear-mongering about how Bernie Sanders, may I don't want to get into that clip with Matthews, but constant. The misinformation is constant. Back in 2008, they were actually held to some standard. You couldn't lie and continually attack a candidate, or else you'd be banned from the network. Today, it doesn't matter, apparently. You can say whatever the hell you want, misinform people again and again and again, whether you're a contributor or a host, and they give you raises because what they're doing here, what the mainstream press is doing, is protecting their own interests. They benefit from the status quo. These massive media corporations benefit from the status quo. These millionaires on television benefit from the status quo. So they aren't going to give you the actual information or any objective analysis when it comes to a working class candidate in Bernie Sanders who is actually fighting for you and has fought for you for 40 years. So peel yourself away from cable news. Go online, read Jacobin, read New Republic, watch YouTube videos, actually learn about what is happening in the country, who people actually support, and what candidates are actually fighting for you.